The movie begins with the introduction of our protagonist, Mason Pettitz. He narrates that while growing up, he struggled to find any sense of purpose or meaning in life. While in college, he enrolled in law school, but it soon got monotonous and he dropped out. After that, he joined the US Army, and it was the first time he found his purpose and felt truly alive. During this period, he also married a woman named Jenny, and they had a daughter. One day, Mason and his team are ordered to go to a country called Paldonia to take down the dictator president Juan Venegas. Unfortunately, their mission takes a tragic turn when their helicopter is struck by a missile. Because of this, most of his teammates die, and although Mason survives, he suffers permanent back damage. After this incident, Mason is let go from the army and has to go back to regular life. With no other choice, he completes law school and starts working as a lawyer. Once again, he loses his sense of purpose, and it starts affecting his personal life and his marriage. In the next scene, Mason is frustrated in his office when his former army general Sebastian arrives. They are happy to see each other after a long time, and Sebastian claims that he has something important to discuss. After that, he takes Mason to his office, where he reveals that he has started his own private security agency called CDI, and that he wants Mason to join him. He explains that a female American reporter is going to Paldonia to interview President Venegas, and Mason needs to accompany her for protection. Hearing this, Mason immediately refuses the offer because Venegas is responsible for the deaths of his teammates and the end of his military career. After all that, he doesn't understand why Sebastian would work for such a guy. Sebastian offers him $20,000 and claims that he knows how miserable Mason is in his lawyer job. Mason says that he's not as strong as he once was and that his back is permanently injured. Still, Sebastian continues to insist, and in the end, Mason reluctantly agrees to take the job. Afterward, Mason researches the female reporter, whose name is Claire Wellington. She used to be a famous journalist, but a professional error in the past led her out of the spotlight. Since then, she has had a tough time finding serious work, and now she finally has the chance to interview a high-profile politician. That evening, Mason and Jenny get into an argument when they find out that their daughter followed her father's advice and hit someone at school. Jenny is distraught and feels that she can no longer be with Mason because he's unhappy with them. She claims she'll move in with her parents, but Mason stops her and says he'll leave instead. He then tells her that he's going to work as a security guard, which angers her even more. However, she eventually lets him go, thinking it might help him move on from these issues and fix their failing marriage. The next day, Mason picks up Claire, and they fly to Paldonia together. On the way, Mason watches some troll videos of Claire, and she notices this. She asks if he's making fun of her, but he assures her that's not the case. She then says that regardless of what happened in the past, she intends to fix her reputation now. She reveals that Venegas hasn't given any media interviews in the last 10 years. However, he has now personally invited her for an interview, so it's a big deal for her career. Soon after, they arrive in Paldonia, where they are greeted by President Venegas. He tells Claire that she's even more beautiful in person and kisses her hand. They then get into a car and head for the capital. Claire introduces Mason to Venegas, who says that he's already done his research and knows that Mason is a former army officer. After this, Claire and Venegas continue chatting and having drinks, completely ignoring Mason. A while later, they are suddenly attacked by some mercenaries. So Mason takes control of the car and sends Venegas and Claire to the back seat. He retaliates by shooting at the attackers, and he ends up crashing their car. After taking out everyone, Mason limps out of the car, and Venegas and Claire are shocked by his combat skills. Venegas continues to praise him, but Mason is irritated and says that he and Claire are leaving right now. Claire says that she needs to conduct the interview first because this is a huge opportunity for her. But Mason says that her life is more important than her career and suggests they leave. Following this, the three of them enter the forest, and Mason contacts Sebastian to let him know what happened. When he reveals that he killed all those attackers alone, Sebastian is shocked. Mason explains that they're stranded in the forest and need a way out, so Sebastian assures him that they will send a helicopter with his men to pick them up soon. After this, Venegas asks for the phone, and he calls his nephew George. George is terrified to learn that his uncle is still alive because he was the one who sent the mercenaries. Venegas then tells his nephew that they were attacked, and he is now stranded in the woods. After hanging up, Venegas informs Claire and Mason that he knows his nephew George is behind all of this. However, he says that George is just a pawn following someone else's orders. Later, Venegas suggests they should head for the capital. However, Mason says that a helicopter is on its way to pick them up and they'll be leaving soon. He then takes Claire with him, leaving Venegas behind. On the way, Claire asks Mason to let her conduct the interview first, but he refuses to listen. Shortly after, they see a helicopter coming and feel relieved, thinking they can finally go home. But to their surprise, a few armed mercenaries come out of the chopper, shooting at them. Mason and Claire run into the forest, with the mercenaries chasing them. Mason manages to take down most of the attackers and even shoots down the helicopter. However, one of the mercenaries catches up to him and brutally beats him. He almost ends up killing Mason, but surprisingly, Venegas shows up and he shoots the assailant. After a while, George and his men show up, and he's upset to see the helicopter's condition. Just then, the leader of the mercenaries, Cohorst, arrives and scolds George for not being able to kill his uncle. George explains that his mercenaries also failed in their task, but Cohorst gets angry and threatens to kill him if he messes up again. Meanwhile, Venegas takes Mason and Claire to his hometown, where the locals admire him. After some time, Claire sits down with Venegas for an interview, while Mason records their conversation. Claire mentions the attack earlier and asks why these mercenaries are after him. Venegas explains that Paldonia has a lot of the rare mineral lanthanide, which is necessary for creating phones, laptops, and other modern tech. Large Western companies want to mine it in Paldonia, but this harms the soil and local environment. If foreign businesses extract and sell the minerals, it will cause big financial losses. So Venegas is preventing all foreign corporations from establishing themselves in Paldonia, making him an enemy of powerful people. Because of this, he is facing attacks from mercenaries and militants paid by external forces. That night, Claire, Mason, and Venegas enjoy a good time partying with the locals. Later, Claire approaches Mason and tries to seduce him. However, he politely refuses and tells her that he loves his wife and can't do this to her. The next day, as they get ready to leave, Mason calls Sebastian and questions why he chose him for the mission. He doesn't understand why the mercenaries from the helicopter were after them, so Sebastian confesses that he actually sent Mason to kill Venegas as revenge for killing their teammates. He reveals that he's received orders from highly influential people to get rid of Venegas. Those mercenaries were not supposed to attack them, but they were only after Venegas. After this, Mason calls his home and his daughter answers the phone. She tells him that she misses him and her mother is very upset. Mason then talks to Jenny, who is relieved to hear his voice. She apologizes for what happened earlier and asks him to return home safely. Afterward, Mason approaches Venegas and Claire and suggests they should leave immediately. However, before they can escape, Cohorst arrives with his men and starts terrorizing the village. So Mason gets on a horse with Venegas and rides away. Claire also climbs on a horse and begins rushing, but soon she falls and is captured by Cohorst. Seeing this, Mason is worried, but Venegas assures him that they won't harm her as long as he's alive. Later, Mason and Venegas reach a town and decide to spend the night there. Venegas shares with Mason that he wasn't the one who shot down the helicopter that killed his teammates. During the American invasion, he had lost hope and was planning to escape through underground tunnels. Paldonia's army couldn't track and shoot down American choppers, so he believes that it was friendly fire. Mason then informs him that he was sent here to kill him, but Venegas claims he already knows that. The following day, Cohorst and his troops arrive in this town as well. So Mason comes up with a plan to save Claire by offering Venegas in exchange. Venegas appears in front of Cohorst, seemingly ready to surrender. However, the scenario shifts when thousands of locals arrive in the streets to protect him. Because the private army has only been contracted to murder Venegas, they cannot open fire on innocent citizens, as this will put them in serious trouble. During the chaos, Venegas, Mason, and Claire head to an underground tunnel and sneak into the palace. In the president's office, they find George sitting alone, who is scared to see his uncle. Claire begins live streaming from her phone, and Venegas tells his nephew not to be afraid of him and that they will protect the nation together. Hearing this, George realizes his mistake, so he tearfully hugs and apologizes to his uncle. Moments later, one of the generals enters, and he immediately shoots Venegas. George gets angry and shoots the general, who fires back repeatedly. Within a few seconds, both George and the general die in the gunfire. However, Venegas survives. As it turns out, he was wearing a bulletproof suit. Venegas is devastated by his nephew's death, but he is soon encircled by many soldiers. They are all pointing guns at him, but he assures them that he is their president, not their enemy. He tells them this is their nation, and they are not terrorists, but soldiers fighting to protect it. Suddenly, Cohorst arrives with his men, but the soldiers turn towards him and start attacking the mercenaries to protect their president. Meanwhile, Sebastian also arrives to help in Paldonia with his troops to help Mason. A shootout ensues, and Claire continues to livestream everything on her phone. Soon after, Cohorst approaches Mason and starts beating him. He claims that he was the one who shot down his helicopter and killed his teammates. This enrages Mason, and the two begin brutally attacking each other. After an intense struggle, Cohorst overpowers Mason and is about to kill him. Just then, Claire attacks Cohorst's head, which brutally injures him. Since the other mercenaries are still after them, Mason takes a huge gun and shoots them all, while Claire records it on her phone. After this incident, Claire's courageous footage is featured in news reports all over the world. In a press conference, President Venegas steps down from his dictatorship and announces a public election for the following year. In the final scene, Mason returns to the US and reunites with his family. He apologizes to Jenny and says that he wants to fix their marriage. Later, Mason checks his account balance and discovers that Venegas sent him $5 million as a reward for helping him. With this, Mason finds a new purpose in life, which is to spend more time with his family.